Welcome everyone to this channel, Anthropohistory and Colonialism. I am Victor Collins, anthropologist, and today's live we're gonna um, take a look um, into the earlier stages of Latin colonialism, the Holy See, in the times of Imperial Egypt and in a very brief and resumed way in Imperial Persia also. Well, why is that? Considering that Roman Christianity is a a, a later a later stage of the Roman Empire, there's a still earlier stage of the Roman Empire which is based on Imperial Egypt and Imperial Persia. And then we're gonna observe that we are dealing with the same patterns. So, um, okay, one of the problems within this large pattern is the imperial cult where the emperor is deified as a messiah. So in Imperial Egypt, this is happening at least between the 18th dynasty up to the time of Augustus Caesar and Julius Caesar. Okay, and this goes aside the formation of a large body of theological authorities, the priests, as also the economical elites. So this is a time where religion and economics become intimates, which we still see in the present day. And it was true also in the time of Columbus and the other pioneers of the Holy See. We also must point to the the formation of fortified and militaristic zones, such as the city of Avaris, one of the earlier cities in Imperial Egypt, where through archaeological research it was found Minoan art in Avaris. And this is very important because uh, the Cretans and the Minoan civilization are directly linked to the cult of Zeus, okay, which in a later stage of um, Roman Christianity or or even Imperial Rome will be known as Jupiter Capitolinum. Um, well, and also the city of Avaris, which is an earlier name, later becomes known as Zaro or Zion. And Zion simply means a fortified zone. Okay. Now, when we look to the modern world and the colonial expansion, what do we see? Fortified zones everywhere, and it's not even hidden. So this is another problem within the larger pattern of imperialism way back from Egypt, right? Of course, all of this is today presented for us hidden in plain sight and through the Latin secret societies are that were and still are the leading powers over the colonialist process. Okay, so it's very important to uh, decode the architecture of cities, the etymological meaning of words such as city, which in Latin means situs is womb, the city hall, for example, okay, um, or even the term capital, which derives from the cult of Jupiter Capitolino Zeus, okay, and also the symbology that is being displayed everywhere. And the most famous example we can see inside a US political building, famous building, which has the fasciae of Rome, which is an imperial symbol and militaristic in nature. Okay. Therefore, we are also talking about the same secret societies deriving from Imperial Egypt in the time that the fortified zones were created and the larger body of authorities was established, that are referenced way up into modern times. Okay, in other words, the secret societies that led and the colonial expansion centered in Rome are referencing through the symbols, through the terms, and through the architecture that they have built in the modern cities way back to Imperial Egypt. Now, a very important concept, actually a central concept, is that of the cult of the sun. Uh, by the time that these fortified zones are created, there is the emerging cult of the Aton, which is, pardon me, which is the pardon me, which is the Egyptian term for the sun, the Aton, right? And in later stages will be known as Sol or Iusus by the time the Roman emperors become deified, such as Augustus and Julius Caesar. And when Roman Christianity takes over, um, yeah, they come with this Greco-Latin term Iusus. Okay, so one definition of the cult of the sun uh, comes with the demand of total obedience under a central cult, okay, through the larger body of the authorities. May uh, they can be the theological authorities or the economical authorities, which in other words means taxation, okay, and very likely the concept of profit also derives from the same imperial structure, okay. And I must mention that between Imperial Egypt and Rome, there is the whole Canaanite system, which is very, very important to study and very influential also. Okay? Well, so the central cult of the sun, as I mentioned, Aton, Sol, and Iusus, can be defined a as an imperial authority demanding obedience. Okay, and also we already debunked in previous lives this concept of paganism, which is nothing but an imperial term that is excludent. It simply means that the emperor uh, and his body occult powers and secret societies considers such and such peoples that are not part of his club as reprehensive or in the need to be excluded. Okay, therefore they are pagans. Okay, because this is very important, because the point that differs between the imperial cult of the sun and what I will call the Magian cult of the sun um, is the demand for obedience, right? There was already a central cult of the sun in Egypt. It was known as Ra, um, but in a earlier civilization that was about an entire different set of values. Okay, and with I must quote also, with an entirely different role of the feminine power in the lead. Okay, it's not that the feminine power disappears later, no, but it changes. It changes in value. Okay, and but the central cult of Ra, the sun, was not about demanding obedience through and subjected to authority. Okay, because that's where the demiurgic theocracy takes place, and we're gonna find ourselves facing a judicial system based on punishment or worse. Okay, and well, the whole modern prison system is based on this earlier pattern of imperialism. Okay, and also based in the demand for obedience. Okay, well, to complete this this concept of a centralized cult of the sun, uh, aside the demand for obedience or the term pagan through imperialism, I will quote Freud from his Moses and Monotheism, right, this brilliant book, when he will say that as soon as the cult of the Aton uh, took over Egypt and became the central authority in theological matters, there was a demand for a surrender of the sexual force. Okay, in other words, this demand of surrendering the sexual force is now tied with the theological or theocratical authorities, and also the economical system. And there is a very clear parallel to the modern world also. Okay, so the commercialization of sex related to money, and also this whole traumatic um, religious past experience in the Western world between uh, these powers and sexuality. Okay, so Freud is already pointing the central problem, right? Therefore, we have here a clear um, relation between all of these problems in a larger pattern that we will find in the modern world also. Okay, of course, the Latin domain is Roman, is Latin, in style and in procedure, but actually it is directly making mention to uh, Imperial Egypt, such as the case of the foundation of Brazil's capital, Brasilia, in a direct parallel to Amarna, the city of the sun. Okay, so these parallels can be seen in the kind of desert-like area they chose to build the city, where the sun would be exalted, right? Aside the whole architecture that was entirely planned and later built by secret societies, okay, which are no different from the secret societies that played a very deep influence in the United States. Okay, when we analyze the symbology, the terminology, the etymology, we will realize that we are dealing with the same forces. Okay, and they are all colonial and imperial in nature. Okay, in other words, they have an agenda, and this is going on since day one from the Holy See colonialism, right? Uh, the results of this agenda uh, may be reflected by anyone, okay? Uh, the catastrophe, right, that derived from this agenda is very clear. Uh, all sorts of catastrophes, including the ecological catastrophe, right? But it's very important to realize that uh, there was always an agenda, a plan, and according to its mentality has been executed as it should be. So um, the same secret societies that designed Brasilia are referencing their ancestors from Imperial Egypt. Okay, this is very clear, and this is no different for the United States also. Well, so now let's take a look. I was mentioning about understanding Roman Christianity in relation to the geography of the Roman Empire. So we must move to the other extreme of the borders, which is Persia. Okay, and there is already a similarity there because in mythology Perseus is son of Zeus, and Zeus is simply an earlier term for the cult of Jupiter Capitolinum, right? And of course, the term capital um, and other terms present in modern day society all derive from Imperial Rome. And now I want to bring the Persian aspect hidden within Roman Christianity through the colonial expansion of the Holy See. So we can take a look at the concept as I was saying that the religious powers, economics, and military all become one complex, and then the emerging authorities. So a key concept to understand this complex is the term monetary. So we have capital and monetary, right? Therefore, the term monetary derives from a quote of Juno Moneta, which is very close to the quote of Sol Invictus when the Roman Empire was present in the borders with Persia. So there is a Persian influence there, okay? There is a relation between the cult of Mithras and the cult of Sol Invictus, okay? Of course, there are distinctions to be made also, but what I am suggesting is that there was an exchange of cults um, between Persia and Rome, okay? And another big influence in our modern day culture is the so-called Gregorian calendar, which is based on the Capricorn solstice of December 25th, the birth of the sun, or Sol Invictus, right? Which is the birth of the unconquerable sun. That's what it means in Latin. And of course, there's a whole analysis to be made. The astrotheology of this solstice um, has to do with the sun being dead on the cross, which is our southern cross, uh, visible to us in the southern hemisphere, and the rebirth of the sun in December 25th. Okay, so all of this, of course, is known. There's nothing new about all of this information. The truth is that this has been hidden from us. Okay, so the astrotheology is um, is linked to imperialism since the times that the Roman Empire was pressing the Persian borders and also exchanging culture and knowledge. Okay, and this influence can be seen today in the modern world. Okay, therefore the um, the cult of Sol Invictus, which is based on the Capricorn December 25th solstice, will turn in a later stage as the Gregorian calendar, which is a very heavy influence as the Julian calendar that I assume is coming from Imperial Egypt, right? Julius Caesar, which is in Latin means jovial, okay? And jovial is another term, Jove is another term for Zeus. And then we find the cult of Zeus, uh, also influential in the eastern borders with Persia through the term Perseus, and also we find in Imperial Egypt, which later will turn over through the Roman Empire and even through Roman Christianity. Okay, uh, this may sound this may sound shocking uh, for many, but the Latin term Deus, is nothing but Zeus. Okay, in a slight variation. That's all that is. Okay. Well, um, what is very interesting to mention is that when the Roman emperors in the eastern borders near Persia uh, were um, looking for advice or for permission, right? Well, they were going to the economic powers, the economic elites, okay? And these economic elites operated inside the temple, okay? In the case the temple of Juno, there is also a temple of Venus in in Lebanon, if I'm not mistaken. That is also part of the same pattern, okay? So these feminine cults within the empire, the economical elite, were actually above the emperor. Okay, of course, this sounds strange, but that's where the emperor went to ask permission to make decisions, military decisions, and also to take action in other kinds of action. Okay, so as I mentioned, there's this whole relation between the economical elites, the imperial cults in exchange between Persia and Rome, okay, and the calendar that came from the cult of Sol Invictus, right? So all of this pattern, including, as I mentioned, the deification of the emperor as Messiah, is absolutely not over. What I mean simply is we inherit all of this from ancient times, but of course it is repainted or simply remade and given to us in a different style. But essentially, the symbols, the terms, and the architecture is exactly the same. Okay, so well, I want to complete this live saying that um, is absolutely necessary for all of us to become literate in architecture. Of course, I don't mean technical knowledge. I mean I'm referring to the meaning and the knowledge that is hidden or occult in the modern architecture, because there's a lot of information that secret societies have been telling us all along, including in all modern cities, including Brasilia and Washington D.C., for example, right? To be literate in the symbology. The fasciae of Rome is an example. The Twin Towers or the Twin Pillars is another example that is very, very common among secret societies. And the etymological meaning of words, okay? Because we may take for granted the language we speak, but actually the modern languages, they are hiding earlier languages which are encoding the whole vocabulary from imperial times, which are very influential today. Okay, so this this is my sharing with all of you to become literate in architecture, in symbols, and in the meaning of terms and words, the etymological meaning, because this work is all about decoding the information that has been um, that has been established, okay, and hidden in plain sight, and always has, okay. And once we can decode information, we can do the work of deconstruction, okay. And deconstruction is when the alternative history, the true history that has been hidden from us, uh, and there is an incredible variety and multiplicity of authors that have been excluded from from the official and established institutions. Okay, there's a very, very important um, um, group of authors which slowly I am mentioning here, and actually they are all quoted in the slides. Okay, and also mentioned in the lives. And when we can deconstruct this imperial pattern, uh, the alternative history will make a lot of sense. Okay, Thank you very much for all of you, and see you in the next lecture or the next live. Thank you.